Jackson Blue. There is something about this Florida paradise, whether it's the rich history, gorgeous water, or the flock of people that enjoy the area each summer, year after year. But like most Florida paradises, there are two words that put a pit in our stomachs. For some of us, it's fear, and others, it's excitement. Cave diving. The signs are littered throughout the grounds and is home to the successful Cave Adventure shop. Yet throughout its history, it has not escaped its share of tragedy. This is one of those stories. Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel where we cover all tragic and terror stories. So if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, plus ring the notification bell to be notified of all new uploads. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. For those immersed in the cave diving world, Jackson Blue is a common name and one of the most active cave diving places today for good reason. It is an absolutely beautiful dive with several offshoots from the main line to keep divers coming back again and again. It is located in the northern part of Florida, just south of the Alabama and Georgia border, where the water hovers around 72 degrees Fahrenheit, a staple for the Florida caves. While open year-round for divers, it is available for other activities such as swimming, snorkeling, or just a relaxing outdoor trip during the summer months. If you ever find your way to Jackson Blue, you will find the home shop for Cave Adventures, one of the staple cave diving shops in the country, as it was founded by legendary diver Ed Sorensen, who has his own history of diving unmapped caves and, of course, rescue dives. To dive the hole today would require registration through his shop, and it is a common place for training or obtaining your certification. Even in 1999, cave diving was common there, although not as common as today. Yet in the late 90s, you would still have to be a certified diver and register with the local sheriff's office before granted access. Steven Wixson, a 33-year-old Alabama native, traveled to Florida with his two unnamed friends for a quick getaway with the intention of diving the famous and beautiful Jackson Blue. All articles have excluded Steven's dive partners' names for privacy. For the sake of this story, we will refer to Steven's friends as Dennis and Michael. All three men were certified cave divers and known in the local area as great divers. By all measures, they were qualified to enter the inner depths of Jackson Blue in the early hours of the morning on Sunday, April 18, 1999. The first few hundred feet of the cave are shallow, with a depth of 12 to 15 meters, which deepens to 27 meters in a short drop-off. The 27-meter depth is held throughout multiple different caverns, stretching for over 4,000 feet. Their plan was to reach the further areas of the cave, 3,000 feet plus. The water was a clear blue as they sat basking in the sunlight, going over their plan one last time. They could not help but start to feel the excitement building in each of their stomachs as their time drew closer and closer. Calm, yet smiles littered their faces. Then it was time, and so with everyone comfortable with their plan and their gear in order, the three men submerged themselves and entered the cave at roughly 9:30 a.m. Fallen trees and wildlife covered the outer areas of the hole, but as soon as they entered the cave, it was incredibly clear and visibility was fantastic, further building each of their excitements. It was a perfect day to dive. They made their way through the first few hundred feet easily and continued following the set dive line as they swam deeper into the depths of the cave. Because of the rich history within the walls, there was already a set line that stretched most of the cavern, while some areas would branch off into other routes that may have distracted or enticed less experienced divers. The three pros were stoic and remained set on their plan. They passed a few other groups of divers as they progressed through the caves, which was expected as today was the perfect day to dive, and there was plenty of space. Over an hour went by as they swam slowly, making progress through the caverns. The visibility continued to be great, and as they swam, they were careful not to stir up any silt on the floor. Some areas are a little bit of a squeeze, but for most of the dive, it is a breeze for the three experienced divers. They found themselves reaching the 3,000-foot mark with no issues at all, and all three members were calm. It was peaceful, at least for the 3 men under the surface. It was at this point that they encountered their first test. Whether it was a bad kick from a member or a careless group in front of them, we may never know. Yet after passing the 3,000-foot mark, the cave silted out, and fast. Visibility was perfect, then within seconds, visibility was 0, and the 3 men could not even see a few inches in front of them. This, of course, made it impossible to see where they were going, yet all 3 men were calm. This is when experience matters, and they knew panic could only lead one way. Steven was leading the group with Dennis and Michael behind him, and when the silt hit the 3 divers, they had a brief window of time where they could see each other, their faces distraught. This was the first moment all day that they began to feel unsettled. It was not a panic, but they started to feel their nerves being tested. Even a professional could not help but feel a little unsure. Although they were experienced divers, they did not know the cave like others, and with 0 visibility, it would make diving the last 1,000 feet extremely difficult. Plus, increase the risk of the dive to a level that none of them were comfortable with. So within those few seconds, the decision was made to turn around, but visibility was only getting worse and spreading throughout the entire section of the cave they were in. It was almost like a domino effect. As soon as their ability to see became worse, it opened the door for more simple errors. A brush of the wall here, a wrong kick there, and the silt became worse and worse with no reprieve. The 3 men turned around, and at this point there was 0 visibility. They could no longer see the dive line, but they knew where it was. So Dennis, Michael, and Steven began swimming in the area, their arms outstretched into the muck that surrounded them. They were grasping for the line, or anything that could help them determine where they were. Even for an experienced diver, it is difficult to remain calm in these scenarios, as all 3 men couldn't help but continue to feel the nerves build into a panic. Yet, they had no choice but to keep searching. They knew they were roughly in the right area, and when suddenly Dennis reached out, he felt it, the dive line. A wave of relief washed over him, and he quickly started following it out of the silt, which at this point was over 100 feet of the cave. Once his visibility started to improve, he felt more at ease, but was still waiting on his diving partners, and he watched as he saw a beam of light slowly exit the cloud of silt. It was Michael. He had made it to Dennis, where you could see the relief on both of their faces. This only lasted a second, as they waited for the last beam of light to appear through the wall of silt in front of them, but there was nothing. A minute went by, then 2, and still no sign of Steven. They were over an hour into the dive, so there was a strong sense of feeling alone. They still had plenty of air, but it would only last so long. They did the only thing they could, and they began to search for Steven. They carefully and slowly entered back into the silt, which still provided almost no visibility, but they knew exactly where they were now, and could easily follow the dive line out. If they were less experienced, they may have never entered back into the silt, but they did so looking for their friend, a calm expression on their faces. Once again, they slowly reached out in all directions, while maintaining a feel for their dive line. For over half an hour, they occasionally felt the brush of the cave wall, the roof, and the rocks, but no sign of Steven. They had searched long enough to where the silt had started to clear, but they were running out of air quickly. They followed the rule of thirds for this exact situation, but were already well into their reserve air. A decision had to be made, and quickly. If they stayed, they would continue to risk their own safety. But if they left, they would be leaving a friend behind. It was an impossible decision that nobody should ever have to make. Yet, with heavy hearts, Dennis and Michael looked at each other and made the decision to turn around and start the long trip back to the exit, leaving Steven alone in the cave. On their way to the exit, they passed another group and shared the message of a missing diver, to which one of their members acted quickly and started searching the area as well. Michael and Dennis could only pray as they made their way back to the surface. Both of them knew that Steven would be losing air fast, and if he did not start making his way out of the cave very soon, he would not have enough to survive. Once Michael and Dennis reached the surface, they quickly called diving experts from their home, Montgomery, Alabama, along with notifying local officials who called in divers from Pensacola. It did not take long for expert divers to reach Jackson Blue, and began preparing to enter the cave. Yet there were lights that would appear from below a few times during their preparation, and they would all hold their breaths as divers would emerge from the water over and over, but not the one that they were looking for. And soon enough, everyone had exited the cave. Everyone except for one. A team of rescue divers entered the cave mid-afternoon, made up of a couple recreation divers and military divers. They each had an extra tank of air with them, as this was the standard, but also just in case if Steven was still alive. The visibility was fantastic at the entrance, and even further in the cave, there was almost no sign remaining of the intense silt that had spanned multiple caverns just hours previously. They made quick work through the caves and soon reached the 3,000-foot mark with ease, where they began their search, yet there was no sign of Steven. They slowly expanded their search and ventured down the multiple connecting caverns, each leading member breathing slow, anxiously looking for any sign. They could not help but feel a sense of dread, as they knew that they were looking for a body. Then they saw him. Steven was floating near the ceiling of the cave, motionless, and with his rebreather floating next to him. They were all calm and found what they had entered the cave for, yet still felt the wave of sadness wash over them. This was an experienced diver and a friend. It just wasn't supposed to end this way. Steven, with no visibility, had made his way into one of the connecting passages mistakenly, and had no chance at making it out, as he had no idea where he was or where the dive line could be laying. The rescue team made quick work of retrieving his body, and at 8:30 p.m., over 11 hours after the original 3 men entered the cave, the final member was brought out of the cavern. Steven's death was not a case of inexperience or someone who shouldn't have been there. It was an accident from an extremely capable diver. It is a testament that even though you follow all the rules and the procedures, it does not mean that you will always feel the warmth of the sun when you enter a cave.